Welcome back, Twisters, and greetings from North Idaho. This is clearly not my usual setup. Anyway, this video we're going to be talking about the San Jose Sharks here in this 2020 offseason and what their potential plans could be regarding their defensemen. So I've already made videos like this regarding coaching, regarding goaltending, and now we're going to move on to defensemen because the Sharks, well, they didn't do so hot defensively this past season. They didn't do so hot whatsoever. But you know what? I don't know. I think things are maybe not quite as bad as they seem in that department. Anyway, if you're a Sharks fan, if you like hockey, make sure that if you haven't already, subscribe down below, hit that big red button. And if you enjoy this video, thumbs up. That always helps the channel. So let's get into it here, okay, guys? So here's how we're going to start. We're going to start by looking at some of the team's defensive statistics. Then we're going to go into the player-by-player statistics, kind of evaluating the cap situation, and then kind of figuring out what sort of their plans could be going forward. We'll start with team defense statistics. So this is team-wide. This isn't just blue liners, but nonetheless, it's important to note this. So first of all, guys, the Sharks were 27th in goals against average. So basically, they were the 5th worst team in goals against. However, they were first in the penalty kill department. So in other words, this team was just defensively not good 5-on-5. They were 10th in fewest shots against, but they were tied for second in most penalty minutes. Nonetheless, really good penalty kill. They were 9th in hits, which is kind of surprising for the Sharks. They were 17th in blocked shots, so pretty middle of the pack there. 10th in the fewest giveaways, and the team has done a pretty good job of that over the past few years. And then one thing that I thought was particularly interesting, high danger chances. So if you go back to 18-19, the Sharks were having a terrible time just surrendering grade A chance after grade A chance. But I think that was getting better when Bob Boughner came in relief of Peter DeBoer, because their high danger chances against was 203, which is actually the league average. Now the difference is that opponents converted 5 more times than the league average, scoring 38 goals. League average is 33 goals. So really, guys, you can definitely chalk some of this up to goaltending, and I know I've defended our goaltenders before, and I still will, but you know, the numbers don't lie entirely now, do they? Now let's see these defenseman statistics, and of course this is going to be a little painful for some of us out here, but nonetheless, bear with me, guys. So Burns and Vlasic, they were the Iron Men. Burns, I can't remember the last time he missed a game. He played all 70 games, so did Pickles. Brendan Dillon did as well before he was traded over to the Washington Capitals. Mario Ferraro played nearly the full season, and that was his rookie campaign. Radim Šimić, he had suffered an injury a good chunk of the way through the season, so he missed some time. Erik Karlsson missed time at the very end. He missed the last 14 games there. And then kind of platooning as your 6th or 7th defenseman was Tim Heed. You also had a couple other guys fill in like Jacob Middleton, Trevor Carrick, Brandon Davidson, etc. Now Karlsson and Burns, as you probably aren't surprised, had their worst offensive output in years. The thing with the Sharks, though, is that really a lot of players regressed this past year. So it's not just our defensemen, it's not just our wingers, it's just about everybody, really. So I have to think that this was kind of an anomaly. I don't think it's going to be quite as bad next year. So I'm expecting a bit of an uptick, maybe more so from Karlsson versus Burns, because Burns is getting older, but still. But you do notice that nobody else cracked even 15 points. And the thing is that the Sharks have gotten good defensive depth scoring. Even Vlasic himself, you know, he's contributed on the score sheet before. He's been up there in, you know, the low 30s for point totals. So I don't know if there's going to be anybody who can pick up that slack. I'm hoping it's Mario Ferraro, but it kind of depends on, you know, how he's, you know, deployed out there. And then looking at some of the other defensive stats, so the numbers are pretty consistent with like league average. If I look at their hits and block shots, if you prorate those to 82 game averages right there. Even without Brendan Dillon, you have a healthy Radim Šimić and Mario Ferraro. They can step in, they can lay the body. This team can block shots. Vlasic can still get that done fairly well at his age. And, you know, you also got to consider that the Sharks have succeeded more so before when their forwards are really involved in, you know, forcing turnovers and blocking shots. Plus you have guys like Vlasic and Burns who they excel in other stats that I haven't pulled up here. You know, you sometimes hear from other sites out there, oh yeah, they led the league in block passes. Vlasic's done that before. Burns has led the league in stick checks, and I know he gives the puck away quite a bit, but he also forces a lot of turnovers, and as does Erik Karlsson. Now, looking at the more advanced analytics out there, you notice that the Corsi for percentage, it looks pretty low for just about everybody. Well, the Sharks were spending more time in their own zone. Their forwards weren't really creating quite as many chances as we're used to. 18-19, they had one of the best offenses in the league. They had one of the worst offenses in the league this year. So when I see how our defensemen have been deployed, a lot of them have had to go back and take faceoffs in the defensive zone, even Burns and Karlsson, more so than they have in their careers for the most part. So it was something that was kind of consistent team-wide, essentially. So these numbers aren't quite as glaringly bad as I expected them to be, but it shows you that the whole team suffered as a result of not being able to capitalize offensively. And of course, the goaltending wasn't quite up to par either. So as we know, this is going to be a very busy offseason for Doug Wilson, maybe more so than ever. This is the first time in 5 years that the team didn't make the playoffs. Now, Wilson has done a nice job with turning teams around for the following season. You look at, missing the playoffs in 2003. What happened? Next year, they went to the conference finals. You look at this last instance in 2015, they got Martin Jones, who, we didn't really know anything about. And they got Jonas Donskoy and Paul Martin as well. He had a very nice first year with the team especially. So Wilson's made some big moves. He's going to have about $14.75 million to play with here. But the thing is that when you think of the Sharks' needs, that might not be enough to really address all of them in the free agency market. We know that the Sharks are going to at least consider their goaltending options. They brought in Alexei Melnichuk, but we don't know if he's going to be NHL ready. They probably need a top six winger. They need somebody who can snipe with a right-handed shot, because I don't think Kevin LeBanc's that guy. And of course, they miss Joe Pavelski and even to a degree Jonas Donskoy. And they also have to sign a couple of these players who are pending UFAs or RFAs who would fit in the bottom six. So to try to fit all of that in, including a defenseman, I don't see that exactly happening. So Wilson's going to have to get very creative. Let's look at the numbers here. Karlsson, 7 more years at $11.5 million, 30 years old. So he's tied up for a long time. Vlasic, 6 more years at $7 million. He's 33 years old. Burns, 35 years old, 5 years at $8 million a year with a modified no-trade clause. Radim Šimik, 4 years at $2.25 million. He's 27 years old. Pretty good contract for Radim Šimik there. Mario Ferraro is on his entry-level deal. And then when you look at other guys who could be that sixth defenseman or are a regular out there. Now Tim Heed, he's probably the closest example to that, but even so, he has never been kind of relied upon to be that sixth defenseman for a lengthy period of time. So I'm thinking the Sharks might actually move on from him. So what other guys could potentially step in there? Well, I don't really think that the Sharks have that sixth defenseman right now. They might have a couple of prospects who can make that. But, Jacob Middleton, to me, he's maybe a seventh defenseman. He's played kind of the most in that sort of role. He's also a left-handed shot, so I'm going to talk a lot about the need for a right-handed shot because typically we're used to seeing a lefty and a righty pair together. I mean, that's not to say that Ferraro and Šimik couldn't play together, for example, but, you want somebody who's a little bit more proven at the NHL level there. Let's look at the prospects, though. So Ryan Merkley, 20 years old, had a very nice season with the London Knights. But again, considering he's very much like Karlsson, and they also have Burns, I don't see them trying to rush his NHL debut anytime soon. I think that he's going to be playing with the Barracuda. Another guy who I think is pretty promising as well is 19-year-old Artemi Knitsev. So he has one more year of eligibility in the QMJHL, had some very good numbers there. So I don't know if he's going to be called up to the Barracuda toward the end of next season, but nonetheless, I think he's somebody to look out for in the near future. The other guys who I think can maybe slot into the Sharks lineup include Jeremy Waugh. He's played a few seasons for the Barracuda, as has Nick DeSimone. Waugh, I think, is, he's the higher touted player. His numbers, at least from what I can see with the AHL statistics that are available to me, they're not like overly impressive, but certainly I think that this guy is going to find himself in the lineup during preseason, at least to kind of prove what he could, do for the team if he gets called up later on. I just don't see Wilson trusting in any of these other guys to necessarily step into that role, but that's just my thought. Before we get into potential free agents, though, let's also think about this, guys. So, the Seattle draft in a year from now. So, the Sharks, Burns, modified no trade clause, they could potentially move him anywhere from as early as now, or they could, move him at the trade deadline if they're not having a good season, or they could give Seattle a chance to draft him. Imagine if he has a better year, Seattle says, okay, well, we got some cap to play with, we can do this. Same with Vlasic. I mean, 6 more years on his contract, $7 million right there. Then you get in Karlsson, so $11.5 million, 7 years. And I think that the Sharks are counting on him to possibly stay healthy for a full season. When he was healthy in 18-19, before he got injured, he actually led the team in points. So, I mean, he's only 30. Come on. I mean, the guy could still get back to form to some degree. So, you got those guys. You got Šimek, who, again, if he's healthy and demonstrates his value, especially if, he works really well playing with Burns and they're not able to move him, then yeah, he's definitely going to stick around on this roster as well. Nice affordable deal there. Ferraro's on his entry-level deal, so he can't go anywhere else. The Sharks, they could possibly look to fill this void with a free agent. So when I see what their needs are, I'm going to be looking at a player who likely would play on the bottom pairing, but they could potentially put somebody kind of on the second pairing, right? So let's say you have Karlsson and Vlasic play together, right? And then you have Burns and you have Šimek. Šimek usually is pretty successful with Brent Burns. So you'd want someone to play with Ferraro. But, the defensive pairings last year, I don't think that they were ever really set in stone. So I could see this getting shuffled around even more, especially if they bring in a different coach too, or at least a different head coach. So here's what I did. I looked for players who were under $3 million and were a right shot and had the experience of, playing a couple of full NHL seasons. And you know what? The pickings were kind of slim, especially if you're looking for guys who are 30 years old or under. So, the Sharks have a lot of veterans out there, so they do need to get a little bit younger. So, here's what I came up with. I'm going to give you 3 free agents, okay? First guy I'm going to talk about, I believe he's 27 or 28 years old, Mark Pysyk of the Florida Panthers. And I know the Panthers aren't defensively the most responsible team out there. He was making $2.73 million this past season, and it's interesting because, at least analytically, he's kind of a head scratcher. So, his block shots and his hits could be way up, as we've seen in his career, and his turnovers would just go through the roof. But then you give him a little bit less ice time, those turnovers go way down. He's much more responsible with the puck, but maybe he's not doing the block shots and the hitting so much. Nonetheless, I looked at his analytics, and defensively, he looks pretty good. He gets deployed in a lot of defensive situations as of late, and the numbers behind that are actually okay. So I can see the Sharks maybe pursuing him. I'm not sure if he's going to be looking for a pay raise necessarily. The next guy I want to talk about is Trevor Van Riemsdyk, who I think is a little bit more proven, at least with teams that have been successful out there. He started with Chicago, and then he went over to the Carolina Hurricanes. And he does have more of a diminished role with the Hurricanes. But if you look at that, they have a plethora of fantastic defensemen, like Joel Edmondson, who they have to re-sign, Jacob Slavin, Brett Pesce, and so on and so forth. So I could see them maybe, letting Van Riemsdyk walk if he gets the right kind of deal. Maybe he does get a little bit of a pay raise. And the other guy I wanted to talk about is Michael Stone, who was only making $1.167 million this past season. So a much more affordable deal, maybe not quite as glamorous as a Van Riemsdyk, if you even want to say that there. But he played a couple of seasons with the Coyotes a few years ago. And in 2015-16, he had his career best of 36 points. He played his last full season in 2017-2018 with the Calgary Flames. 1645 average time on ice, 158 blocks, and 106 hits. So definitely not afraid to get in the way of some shots out there. Now, he's not going to be out there to help create chances, but overall, defensive efficiency looks pretty strong, and I think that that's probably one of the better bargains you can get. Some of the other notable players I wanted to mention out there who are free agents, UFAs, you have Joel Edmondson, who, again, I don't see why he wouldn't at least stay in Carolina or get a pay raise somewhere. Ben Hutton, Derek Forbort, Carson Soucy, who the Wild need to re-sign. I liked his defensive numbers this year as well. Oscar Fantenberg of the Canucks, another pretty good proven player who had served with the LA Kings still when they were good defensively, along with Forbort, Nathan Beaulieu, Jan Ruta, Christian Folin. So most of those guys are already left-handed, so I don't think the Sharks are necessarily going to think about them first when pursuing. But wait a sec, guys. Now comes the trap card. And I know that some of you Sharks fans were thinking about this. Could they possibly bring back either Brendan Dillon or Dylan DeMello? Brendan Dillon's going to be the harder of the two, I think. I know we as fans absolutely love some Dilly, and he loves being in San Jose, and he just had a very short stint with the Washington Capitals, just going for 10 games and then having to take 4 months off and then, playing here in the playoffs. We'll see how far they go. So, I don't know if he's married to the idea of staying with them. Plus, they have to, I don't know if they're going to, try to keep Gudas at that price. They have to also sign Siegenthaler. They have to consider what they're going to do with Braden Holtby, although I have a feeling they'll let him walk. But it'll be interesting. If the Canucks had more cap room available, I would think that they'd consider signing Dylan, his hometown team. But nonetheless, I still think the Sharks are an option, especially if Burns wants to play with Dilly again instead of with Radim Šimik. Then Šimik can slot down with Ferraro, and I'd be okay with that. But again, I don't know if we're going to be able to afford him. I don't know if he would take $3 million, because that would be a pay cut to come back to the Sharks. Whereas, I think if he's going to be playing alongside a guy like John Karlsson or something, he's definitely going to be looking for a pay raise. So I'd say that there's like a 15% chance that could happen. I do think Dylan DeMel is more possible because, he's actually thrived at times, even in the Ottawa Senators, and he was traded over to the Winnipeg Jets and got some good ice time there as well. I know that he wouldn't have quite the demand placed on him here. Who knows, the Jets might want to actually re-sign him because they are kind of thin when it comes to defensive depth. But nonetheless, he had some very good defensive efficiency numbers with the Sharks, even when he was starting out his career there. And I think he's a little bit of an upgrade over Tim Heed. And then, if shit really hits the fan, bring in, I don't know, Middleton or Jeremy Waugh, something like that. So anyway, I'd say that that's more of like a 30% chance. I think that maybe Dylan DeMello, maybe he's like, okay, maybe I'll come back to you guys. Especially if Bob Boughner's still there, with that defensive structure. We can see the return of one Dilly. I would definitely appreciate some Dilly, but I don't think Doug Wilson has the cap room for that. Well, anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this video. Again, I'll be doing this for the Sharks forwards, so stay tuned for that video in the near future. Hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe down below if you haven't already, and I'll see you for more San Jose Sharks coverage. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll catch you later. Ciao.